Good evening. Today is October 9th, 2021. I'm Robert Crescione.
I'm John Gatsis.
Welcome to America in Danger. Now, before we get started, I want to give a shout out to my mother and sister and JoJo the Clown down in New Orleans.
Okay.
They fared fairly well in the hurricane, so
right.
We're glad that they survived, and they are loyal watchers. So, and there are a couple other loyal watchers. I think we've got one in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
George, I believe, is his name.
Yep.
So,
yep.
Hey, George, and a few other elsewhere. So, our remote viewers, I appreciate them.
We do appreciate it.
Now, I've got a question that I want to ask.
Okay.
And it's just for the audience.
All right.
All right.
Good. I'll stress level just went down.
All right. Are you tired of being lied to? I mean, that's a valid question today.
Right, it is.
Are you tired of being lied to?
I think I speak for many who would just say, well, I'm numb.
Yeah.
I'm numb from it, and I've kind of tuned it out, and I just assume I'm being lied to until, proven otherwise. I mean, so.
Well, you mentioning numbness, I think that is the goal.
I agree with that. I think it is. I mean, if you look throughout history when these kind, and that's the thing about this situation. This may seem like unfamiliar territory to so many people, the circumstances we find ourselves in, and really to be specific, the circumstances we find ourselves in is an attempted takeover by Marxist, Leninist communists of this country. Mm-hmm. Now, this has been in the programming and planning stages for a long time and the execution stages for a long time. We're seeing the culmination of lots of efforts put towards that through the universities, the institutions, things that we've talked about ad nauseum on this show. Okay, but I think for people who are just now becoming aware of this is really for those of us who study this. This seems like how can you miss this? This is so obvious because this is what what's happening now has repeated itself so many times throughout history in so many other nations. We have some very recent examples. Venezuela, you can just go look and see what happened there in the late 90s and early 2000s. This is following exactly that game plan. And, on paper, I'm not shocked that people don't get it because I know the numbers and I know most people aren't engaged in this stuff. And they don't need to be. I mean, really, the whole beauty of our society heretofore and the structure has been that really you kind of just worry about your own life. Mm-hmm. You worry about your day-to-day affairs. The Constitution was structured in such a way that you didn't have to worry too much about these authoritarian types because they were limited. They didn't have the ability to insinuate themselves into your life. Unfortunately, that's been slowly eroded over a long period of time, but it's being accelerated to such a degree right now that I think it's shocking even people who've heretofore been disengaged. And those people, I think, are shocked and don't know what's going on. And I think they are getting tired of being lied to. They don't understand it, and they're also waking up, I hope. I just hope it's not too late.
I agree. And, there are a lot of people that I speak to who say, I didn't realize what was going on. Mm-hmm. Up until a couple of years ago, mm-hmm. they weren't interested.
Right.
But, the last show, we talked about the development of communism back in the 1700s.
Right, the origins.
And we talked about how every time it was beat down, it simply resurfaced under a new name.
Yeah, it gets rebranded, as they say.
Rebranded.
Yeah.
It's like playing whack-a-mole. You
knock
one down and another one pops up somewhere else.
Or another good example is, cockroaches. You see one, you kill it, there's 1,000 more,
This is true. And that's absolutely correct. The groups that originated communism back in the 1700s simply reformulated, renamed themselves, mm-hmm. popped up somewhere else, continued on, and their pattern of operation, their MO, as they say, mm-hmm. has always been the same.
Right.
And we've seen that in this country. Now, Joseph McCarthy, back in the McCarthy era, tried to warn people of that, and of course it's like proving I don't know, it's hard to describe. Yeah, I know he had some methods that he used, and there were some issues, and he was largely used
Right.
by the very people he was trying to expose.
Though fundamentally he was correct in his claims.
Fundamentally, he
I mean,
was correct.
Alger Hiss did turn out to be a communist Soviet spy.
Exactly. And
Okay.
Alger Hiss, for those who don't know, was an advisor in the Truman
Right.
cabinet, in
Right.
the Truman administration.
And Nixon was really the one who blew the lid off of Alger Hiss.
Was
to a
it
certain extent.
Nixon?
Yeah, and the press never forgave him for it.
Yeah.
Because the press in this country is fundamentally pro-communist, people. Don't forget that, I mean, or try and become aware of it, because they are, and they have been.
That's exactly right. And, Alger Hiss, not only was he in the Truman administration advising Truman, but he actually drafted the charter for the United Nations.
Right.
So he developed the United Nations. It wasn't by himself. Certainly he worked with other people. But
Right.
he is largely responsible for the UN Charter.
Right.
And, I want to say something about the UN. They have a Universal Declaration on Human Rights.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people who, I want to call them the ignorant left, or the uninformed left,
The low information left.
the low information left, trying not to be too offensive to them.
Yeah.
But they often quote the Universal Declaration on Human Rights and want to adopt that.
Right.
In fact, they've suggested that that should be the U.S. Constitution. We
Oh, of
should
course they
scrap
do.
our Constitution and adopt that.
Well, they really are ignorant to
They
assert
absolutely
that.
are. They absolutely are, because in it, if you read through it, it sounds good most of the way. Sounds good. They grant you the right to freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom to gather, all of that stuff. But when you get to Article 29, that is the real kicker right there. Because Article 29 says each individual has these rights as allowed by law.
Right, as allowed by law.
As allowed by law. And what does that tell you? That tells you that some bureaucrat somewhere can take any right away from you that they want.
Right, and the fundamental distinction there is that the Constitution, as written by the founders, casts our rights as immutable. They already exist. They are an immutable artifact of nature, God, however you want to characterize it, but they predate and pre-exist government. Okay? So what they're really doing is just codifying those rights and laying them out and saying government may not intrude on these fundamental rights. That's a huge difference. You can read the Soviet Constitution, okay, and it seems like a fairly, rights-friendly document.
Yeah.
But I don't think anybody, well, I'm going to pull back on that a little bit. Most people would not want to impose a Soviet-style, political regime on this country. But we're kind of in the middle of having that happen, so I guess I'm wrong about that.
We are. And
I don't think people at large want that.
No.
But they don't understand it.
And since you mentioned that, I would like to mention Biden's nominee to be comptroller of the currency, which that position, while little known, a lot of people don't even know it exists and don't know what they do.
Right.
But that position controls the bank.
Right, that's basically the banking system, the banking system czar, as it were.
Exactly.
Play on word, I really did. With what we're about to learn here, but
But anyway, this individual is a Soviet Russian from the old Russia,
Right.
from the old USSR, who went to college on a Lenin
right,
scholarship.
Vladimir Lenin, founder of the the prime mover, of the Soviet, the Bolshevik Revolution.
She also graduated from Moscow University.
Right.
And what was it? She said something about the USSR might have had some problems, but
Well, she said, I can read it, but I think if I recall the phrase, she said, well, everything about the USSR's economy wasn't bad. There certainly was no gender pay gap. She said that the market doesn't always know best. Well, actually, she's wrong. The market does know best in almost all circumstances. And we dispelled that myth briefly last week. I mean, the whole notion of a gender pay gap is kind of foolish because, the very people who assert that businesses are nothing but greedy, profiteering capitalists who care nothing about the bottom line and care nothing about the workers, okay, they assert there's this pay gap. Well, if what they were saying about businesses were really true, and there were all these women out there who could do the exact same job as men, then these greedy businesses would be employing them instead of the men.
That's right. It'd be an
Because it
all-female
would go to
staff
their
out
bottom
there.
line.
That's right.
But of course, that's not what happens. Why? Because the market recognizes that there are some fundamental differences there in the groups of people, and in a specific situation, the market recognizes that there isn't necessarily equality between a given female and a given male for a given job position. When there is a superior female, she will get hired.
Mm-hmm.
The market will dictate that, and they do often. But and the pay gap is nonsense anyway, because those numbers are based on yearly averages, not on pay rates. If you look at pay rates, okay, there's no gap.
Right.
But women take more time off. They raise children. They decide they want to work more of a part-time. There are lots of things that go to that apparent gap. And again, it's typical of the left. They manipulate the numbers to make you think a certain thing that isn't fundamentally true.
That's right.
But going back to this woman, just to be clear, she's a Soviet-trained communist, okay, citizen in this country who Joe Biden had just named and nominated to be comptroller of the currency, basically in charge of the banking system. Okay, to me, I don't know what more evidence you need.
Right.
Okay. I mean, can you imagine? I grow weary of the gee, if the roles were reversed, can you imagine? But can you imagine if somebody named, some element from who had some kind of a Nazi past or something? Mm-hmm. Which is really an unfair comparison anyway, because the Nazis are leftists too.
Right. Well, that's right.
But in the popular lexicon, political lexicon that people use today, they equate the Nazis with the far right. Mm-hmm. And if somebody were named by, say, Donald Trump, who had any kind of connection with the Nazis to be in charge of there'd be a dedicated cable channel just talking about that. They'd start a new cable channel just to have those discussions.
Yes, there would.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So to me, this is just over the top evidence, prima facie evidence that our government right now is primarily being orchestrated and controlled by communists and communist sympathizers.
Absolutely. And this individual's name is
Saul Amarova.
Saul Amarova.
Yeah.
Thank you for the pronunciation, because I was a little hung up on that one. Here's what she says. She says the core idea here is simply to allow all U.S. citizens and lawful residents, local governments, non-banking firms, and non-business entities to open transactional accounts directly with the Federal Reserve, thus bypassing private depository institutions. In a sense, it is variation on the familiar Fed accounts or Fed coin, digital dollar wallets, etc. In principle, Fed accounts can be made available to an alternate to bank deposit accounts upon a person's request. So she wants to eliminate all private banking.
Private banking, local banks, large banks, right.
She wants everything in the hands of the feds.
Right.
Now, we know that the feds are right now trying to grab everyone's accounts and have everything 600 or more reported.
Right. They want the IRS, they want the banks to report any transaction or balance exceeding $600 to the IRS. Now, I don't know, if that doesn't make the hair on your neck bristle, I don't know what will.
It absolutely does.
People need to really make a stink about that. That is just the most outrageous thing. And if you sat there and watched Janet Yellen, who's the Secretary of the Treasury right now, and was the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board herself under who? Obama, was it? When was she?
Yes, I think so.
Right. You'll see that she is nothing but an authoritarian, left-wing communist.
Yes, she
okay,
is.
That's exactly what she is, and there is no mistaking where her sympathies and her allegiances lie, and that she should justify and promote that action on the part of the IRS is just hard to imagine that it is moving this quickly in this country. And people need to really push back on that one hard.
They do, and there is no constitutional authority for any of that.
Well, there's no constitutional authority for the IRS to begin with, really.
Or the Fed.
And the irony is, and I mentioned this last week's show, but the irony is, she wants to eliminate all private banking, but really what she wants to do is turn everything over to what can most charitably be characterized as a quasi-private bank. The central bank is fundamentally a private bank itself. The Federal Reserve is not an agency of the federal government.
That's right.
Okay, it's a private bank. It has member banks. Its charter is overseen by the government, but fundamentally it's a private bank.
That's
Okay?
correct.
And I just think and yet, oddly, it's not ironic, because really, what is communism? We talk about this, but what is communism? It's really the ultimate monopoly. Okay, it's the nation state as the single corporation. You know, what is China? China is a giant corporation with a big board of directors called the Communist Party, and they're a part of every business activity and everything that gets planned economically in that society. There's no free market there. There's no individual choice. Small business, they might, they'll allow a little breathing room for a while, and people will set things up and do them, but then they'll show who's boss, and they'll shut that stuff down. I read a story recently where a U.S. businessman had a business over there. Something he did, they just disappeared it. I mean, they just seized all the assets, shut it down, it's gone. That's completely within their legal structure, and that's how they operate. They're basically like the mob.
Exactly.
For people who watch the HBO series The Sopranos, it'd be like having those folks in charge of the entire economy, and you did business with and through them, and that was the deal.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's that, and so really what she wants to do is turn the banking system over to a little oligarchy of private, business entities or individuals who are also part of the government. It's the ultimate, fascist communist play, and she's right in the open supporting that, and she's Biden's nominee to be comptroller of the currency. So
that's scary.
That's not a dream. We aren't making this stuff up.
That's a nightmare.
That's a nightmare.
That's a nightmare. Now, for those who don't realize it, all of these ships, or many of the ships, sitting off the coast, sitting off ports right now around the U.S., many of the ships are owned by the Chinese Ocean Shipping Company.
Right.
COSCO, you'll see it on the side of the ship sitting out there.
Yeah, Costco. And that's not the discount,
right.
big it's not the big box. Yeah, right.
It's not the big box store. That's
not where you go to get your janitor drum-sized barrel of pickles.
Exactly.
Right.
But Costco, the Chinese Ocean Shipping Company, is a branch of the Chinese military.
That's right, the People's Liberation Army.
And people don't realize that, and it's as you say. It's a huge monopoly on power and
commerce, and that's right.
Everything.
And unfortunately, we've had a lot of greedy folks in this country who have facilitated all this, some wittingly, some unwittingly.
Yeah.
I think it's about 50-50, frankly. I think a lot of these people know exactly what they're doing. But Vladimir Lenin, for whom the scholarship was named that Amarova, received her education, famously said, "The West will sell the rope with which they hang themselves."
Yes,
and I think we are seeing that he was prophetic in that point anyway.
Yes, we are.
He was evil, he wasn't stupid.
Yeah, absolutely. The supply chain, speaking of the supply chain is hosed up right now.
Very much.
We've got ships sitting off the coast, and we know basically who's responsible.
That's
for
right.
That,
That's right.
It's Joe Biden, but I've got a graphic that I want to show you of the condition of the supply chain.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah. So, Lee, if you'll pull up that graphic for me of the supply chain. There we go.
Wow.
That's the condition of the supply chain, and actually, that's what a lot of people think of it too.
That's right. Well, I guess we got some NASCAR fans out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, and with that, we got to take a little commercial break. So we will be back shortly for more America in Danger. Stay tuned.
Hey, this is John Woodruff with Premier Equipment Company of Rocky Mountain Infield. Been shopping for a zero-turn mower lately. You've probably noticed that inventory is getting hard to come by. So come on down and see what we've got. We've got a showroom full. We have a showroom full of Exmark and Grasshopper zero-turn mowers, everything from commercial to residential, everything in between. We've got a good relationship with our distributors. They tell us when we sell these, they've got more on the way. If you've been in the market for a zero-turn mower, come see me, John Woodruff from Premier Equipment.
Premier Equipment is open during the week from 8 to 5:30 and on the weekends from 8 to 12.
Are you afraid to answer the phone because of bill collectors? A Chapter 13 plan can help. Chapter 13 allows people with too many bills to work out a debt repayment plan under federal law. It helps you control your debts instead of your debts controlling you. Chapter 13 stops creditors from harassing you and stops repossessions and foreclosures. It allows you to answer the phone again without fear or worry. Call H. Frank Allen, Attorney at Law, a debt relief agency providing bankruptcy relief under the Bankruptcy Code.
All right, we are back, and hope you saw that graphic on the supply chain and understood it.
Very informative. Well,
Very informative.
if you didn't Google it,
That's exactly right.
or DuckDuckGo it.
You know, right now it's what, 38%?
Yeah,
Approval
rating.
rate of Joe Biden. Yeah.
But you know, frankly, they don't care.
No, they don't. They don't care because
Yeah.
he's able to accomplish what he's put there.
That's right. That's right.
Now, everyone should have seen or should know about the Facebook whistleblower that's come forward, Frances Haugen. Mm-hmm. Now, she presents very well and voices some concerns, but the interesting thing about it is, in reality, she is anything but a whistleblower. Mm-hmm. She is actually an advocate for the things that Facebook is doing and that the government wants done, especially coming out of the White House, because they've engaged in censorship already.
Right.
By suggesting sites to be taken down and individuals to be taken down. Mm-hmm. It's come right straight out of the White House to Twitter and Facebook. But Frances Haugen testified before Congress, and she advocates for not less restriction, but more. And we got a caller, so let's take this caller and see if this individual is tired of being lied to.
Okay.
Thanks for calling America in Danger. Are you tired of being lied to?
Gentlemen,
Good evening.
the government is not lying. The government is doing what money dictates to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I can agree with that.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to watch the program, but the signal's coming in broken.
Uh-oh.
If you could, please mention it to the engineers down there, all right?
All
will
right.
pass
we
that
sure
along.
will. Sure will.
All right, have a good day.
Thank you
All
for
right.
calling.
Thank you much.
Well, he does make a point, and maybe we'll circle back to his point when we hit the next topic, because I think that's a component of some of the reasons for the vote in the Senate yesterday. But we're carrying on with
the Frances Haugen whistleblower. But as I said, she's anything but a whistleblower because she's advocating more censorship, more restriction, more elimination. And if you read between the lines a little bit, she is actually targeting conservatives in her diatribe before the House.
Well, she's a huge Democrat donor.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And yeah.
You know, if I didn't know better, I would say that she was put in that position strategically.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, my antenna went up when all the major networks and news organizations were touting this whistleblower that was going to come on. Well, you know, they're part of this whole cabal. So the idea that they would be promoting and disseminating information about a true whistleblower didn't pass muster. And I'm so cynical now, I just assumed that, well, she's really there to, what she's really there to do, it seems obvious to me after listening to her testimony, she's there to control the response because everybody's saying they're not happy with the social media situation.
Right.
So her basic function there is to facilitate regulation in a way that perpetuates the left's desires and motives under the rubric of regulation while further shutting down and canceling and concealing or suppressing, I guess is the word I want, conservative thought and free thinking.
Yeah.
Okay, and so, I mean, again, I'm so cynical these days. The minute I saw that the major news media were covering her testimony, I said, well, this is phony. This is gaslighting.
Yeah, I agree 100% on that. She says, there's too much hate speech. Well, I'm sure there's some hate speech out there, but
how defined?
Exactly,
Yeah.
define that. And,
I'm sure this whole show, in her view,
absolutely.
one hate speech diatribe, from her perspective.
Absolutely. We would be engaging in hate speech
Right.
with this show, I'm sure, in her eyes, and the eyes of the left, the eyes of the Democrats, most of the Democrats, because we already know that there's a whole host of communists, modern-day communists, who call themselves progressives.
Right.
It's a tactic of the left.
Well, of course.
A tactic of the communists to simply rename themselves, rebrand themselves.
That's right.
And pick a name that seems
Innocuous.
palatable.
Yeah.
And that's the progressives. But we've seen the rabid progressives like AOC and Squad and Rashida Tlaib. All of them have advocated for re-education of Trump supporters.
Well, and even some of the old school Marxists like Chuck Schumer, pretty radical talk coming from him, threatening Supreme Court justices, back during the Kavanaugh thing. And
absolutely.
He's a horrible specimen and a horrible human being.
Absolutely.
He's a communist. He would never admit to it, but he is one.
Absolutely.
And if you could really dig into, I really would love to understand the psychology that motivates these people. I don't know why they support the most criminal, violent, despicable ideology that's plagued this world the last century. I don't know what drives them to support that. There's some kind of internal resentment, or I don't know. I don't understand it. I really don't.
I'm not sure.
It's a different conversation, but in addition to all the new modern communists, there are a lot of old school communists in our government as well.
There absolutely are. And not only are there old school communists in there, there are old school collaborators in there.
Right. Well, that's right.
Hence the Senate vote that 11 collaborators went over and voted with the Democrats to raise the debt ceiling.
Right.
It's my understanding that they could have done it through reconciliation.
They could have done it, and Mitch McConnell's original posture, and let's just recap briefly what was going on here. I mean, the government, Congress passed a law some years ago saying, I think it was way back, I think World War II era, that you cannot borrow more than a certain amount of money without, we have a debt ceiling. There's a limit on the amount. And of course, every year we go through this ritual, every couple of years, where we raise the debt limit so that the government can spend in its profligate way. All right. Well, normally that's sort of a bipartisan process. Everybody does it. But, the Democrats are trying to pass this $3.5 trillion, and that's a conservative estimate. Really, if you score it, honestly, it's really $5 to $7 trillion of spending, which is unprecedented. It would destroy everything. And the plans, that's, again, a separate discussion. But they didn't include any Republican discussion. They completely shut them out of it. Okay. When it came time to raise the debt ceiling, Mitch McConnell's original posture was, well, you do this on your own. Use reconciliation for that. You're going to use it to do this other thing, which cuts us out. And the reconciliation is really a budget process. Okay. It's not really bona fide legislative process,
right.
But it allows them to bypass the 60-vote filibuster rule, which has been in place for 190 years or 150 years rather, or some long period of time. It's not an actual thing in the Constitution, but it's basically a rule that makes it so you have to have a supermajority in the Senate to pass legislation. It's very important protection, really, for everybody.
Absolutely.
Okay, and the Democrats want to get rid of it, and budget reconciliation allows them to bypass that because they can get legislation over the hill or over the top with the 51 votes. They did it with Obamacare. They passed that through budget reconciliation. It's very, very sneaky and kind of sort of a legerdemain thing. It's a very sort of underhanded thing.
I believe that's why Justice Roberts came back and declared it a tax.
No, that's right.
So that it would fall into that category that they could do under the budget.
That's right. So, to raise the debt ceiling, McConnell said, well, you've got the votes to do it through reconciliation. He was going to force their hand and put them really in a box. They weren't going to be able to go forward with a lot of the stuff that they want to do. And then suddenly out of the blue, he offers them a debt ceiling extension and gets 11, or I guess 10 more Republican senators. 5 of them were the usual suspects, people we always know are really genuinely rhinos, an acronym for, Republican in name only. The Lisa Murkowskis and Susan Collins and Ben Sasses and those types. Rob Portman. Surprisingly, Mitt Romney wasn't on board this one.
I'm surprised.
Yeah, I guess
I would have guessed Mitt Romney.
Well, I guess he didn't have to do betrayal duty this time.
Right.
I guess that felt as
they let him slide.
They rotate through a handful of them. But, going to what the previous caller said, I really believe that there's either, I think in all these votes that don't make any sense whatsoever, okay, there's either a very significant carrot or a very significant stick in play. Either there's some blackmail that's being brought to bear, or there's some financial incentive. There's something that these people benefit.
Yep.
And you've heard me say 1,000 times on this show, I characterize the political class right now as a coalition of communists and grifters. Okay, and the grifters more or less correspond to the Republicans. and no better piece of evidence do I need to point to than yesterday's vote in that Senate.
Yeah, well, the political class, and I've said it numerous times on this show, has the highest incidence of criminal behavior of any political class in this nation, in the world.
Right.
They are by far the most corrupted body of individuals.
Absolutely. In the world. And it's particularly vexing because they produce nothing. They are parasites in the most extreme possible way you can judge a parasite. I mean, there's some parasitism that is beneficial, right? And there's no beneficial parasitism here.
No.
They absolutely produce nothing, and they create nothing, and all they do is redistribute the productive efforts of others, enriching themselves in the process.
Absolutely. Look at Nancy Pelosi, 33 years in
absolutely,
there. Has produced nothing. Joe Biden, 47 years.
That's right.
Years
That's
now,
right. Even our own Senator Richard Burr got called hard for doing basically what amounted to insider trading as the COVID pandemic got ramped up. Okay, he got caught dead to rights doing that. It's clear that's what he was doing. These people are all self-serving, self-aggrandizing grifters.
Now, I firmly believe that Richard Burr bought his way out of that by holding hearings on Trump.
Right.
And the Russian collusion.
Right.
Because he knew full well there was no collusion. There was no evidence of that. And yet he held hearings, and I believe that's how he bought his way out of that.
Right. That was his ticket away from actual, harsh prosecution.
I believe so. Maybe that's just my, conspiratorial side, but I fully believe that because, these people are corrupted.
They are highly corrupt.
Absolutely corrupted.
They are.
If you remember the shenanigans that went on with Robin Hayes, the CAFTA vote, the promise to build a BARDA facility in Kannapolis, and that was Richard Burr promising that because he controlled that. Right. He had the bill, the BARDA bill, and the BARDA committee, the committee that approved that, would decide where it would be built.
Right.
Well, I fully believe that's how they got Robin Hayes to change his vote on the CAFTA treaty. That's the Central American Free Trade Agreement that would have lost had Robin Hayes, that would have been defeated rather, had Robin Hayes
not switched
stood
his vote.
firm. And he promised his constituents that morning on the radio that he would not vote for a job-destroying trade agreement, or another job-destroying
That's right. And when those things happen, you just have to know, what, somehow something was brought to bear that was really either a powerful financial incentive or a powerful blackmail incentive, and either some seriously negative stuff or some seriously positive stuff, but something, because these people certainly don't operate according to principle.
No, they do not. And the interesting thing about BARDA, which was the I'm trying to think of what are the bio and pandemic research, something or other. I don't remember the exact definition of it was, but it was biological labs to study pandemics and do research in bioweapons, essentially. Well, that bill got defeated.
Right.
So what did they do? They did the same thing the communists always do. They repackaged it, slipped it in with some other stuff, and proceeded to pass it. And this is ancient history, basically, but the BARDA bill provided an unlimited budget, provided $1 billion the first year, and then an unlimited budget after that, and it excluded the BARDA facility from typical GSA standards. So they had no oversight. There was no one that was ever going to see this agency. It was a very corrupt bill and very dangerous bill, and it got repackaged and passed under the cover of darkness.
Right, and all at the hands and behest of these corrupt politicians.
Exactly.
But now I want to make a point. Okay, some might out there say, well, let's see how you behave if you get in a situation where they offer you, $20 million to do this. Well, that's not really I guess the overarching point is we've drifted away from the solution to that problem, and that was the Constitution. The founders had these exact same corrupt, self-serving individuals, in their day, and they very wisely and frankly magnanimously set up, because they could have they had control of everything after they won the war for independence. They very magnanimously set up a system of government that gravely and severely limits the influence of those people on our lives. Okay, and we've gotten so far away from that. These people have regained their foot. Again, you can spray those cockroaches down, but they come back eventually.
They absolutely do.
And unfortunately, I think it's time for that famous tree that Thomas Jefferson talks about that needs to be the tree of liberty. I think it needs to be watered a little bit.
Absolutely, watered and fertilized.
Yeah.
I agree. And the founders also counted on an informed electorate.
An informed electorate, but also an electorate that was comprised of people who had a stake in the economy.
Exactly.
You will never have an informed electorate when you allow people who receive net benefits from the government, i.e. goodies extracted from other citizens, to vote. Okay, that's a fundamental conflict of interest, and I think it was Alec de Tocqueville back in the 1800s, and he was touring the United States. I think he made the statement that when the society realized it can vote itself goodies from the public till, and that threshold reaches 51%, that'll be the end of this experiment in liberty and democracy. Something to that effect.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what's happened. I mean, it's not so much. I mean, you're fond of saying the electorate is broken. I would argue that if you actually limited the franchise, the ability to vote, to people who were net taxpayers in some form or another, okay, and who could pass a basic civics test rather, okay, you'd have a completely different outcome.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely different outcome.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I've advocated for that we fix the electorate.
Right.
Because you've got to eliminate those who, number one, have no stake in it. Therefore, they're only voting to take from those who do have a stake.
That's right. I mean, if a politician can get votes by promising Group A to take money from Group B, okay, well, of course he's going to do that. And that process is going to cultivate the worst of the political class, of that type of person who even wants to be involved in that activity, which makes them suspect to me already. I mean, anybody that wants to be a politician, I'm already thinking, there's what goes on with your psychological makeup to make you want to do this, because you're probably not a good person.
Exactly. And even those who truly have good intentions, by the time they're in there a year,
that's right,
those intentions are shot.
Right. Well, they're human beings, and human beings are corruptible.
Right. Exactly. They are very corruptible. We see that time and time again. We saw that with Renee Elmer.
Just thinking about that. Talk about a disappointment.
Especially with Renee Elmer's, as soon as she got an interview on CNN and was given a committee chair, that was it. She turned her back on everyone that got her elected and went for the vote.
Didn't you interview her on this show early on, years ago?
Yeah. Had her at some speaking events, and that was a big mistake there. But she was what appeared to be the best of the best.
Right.
Turned out to be a flop.
Well, what's the joke about the tallest midget in the room?
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah,
that's right. All right, with that, we got to take a little commercial break. We'll be back for more America in Danger, and when we get back, we're going to talk about some developments in the COVID cult.
All right, well, it is a cult.
Stay tuned.
This is Nicholas Bellamy at Premier Equipment. I'm going to talk about the 4540 Mahindra. It's 38 horsepower, full cylinder engine. The weight of this tractor is 4,000 pounds. This tractor is perfect for bush hogging, distance, small garden, a hunting club tractor. Comes with a 7-year warranty, 2-year bumper to bumper, additional 5-year on the powertrain. You can have this tractor for $200 a month, and we have 20 of these tractors in stock. Premier Equipment is open during the week from 8 to 5:30 and on the weekends from 8 to 12.
Are you afraid to answer the phone because of bill collectors? A Chapter 13 plan can help. Chapter 13 allows people with too many bills to work out a debt repayment plan under federal law. It helps you control your debts instead of your debts controlling you. Chapter 13 stops creditors from harassing you and stops repossessions and foreclosures. It allows you to answer the phone again without fear or worry. Call H. Frank Allen, Attorney at Law, a debt relief agency providing bankruptcy relief under the Bankruptcy Code.
All right, we are back, and I'm surprised that the voting Nazis didn't break into the studio and shut us down, because we probably committed the cardinal sin saying that,
Not everybody needs to be voting.
Exactly.
But let me augment those statements with one other comment, because I think people lose sight when they hear that part. Well, that's not democratic. And then what happens? You just have the few rich people who are voting, and well, yeah, you're missing the main point. The main point is that we have a Constitution, and that Constitution gravely limits what politicians can do. And frankly, I would much rather live in a society where those constitutional rights as originally enshrined, okay, are honored. I wouldn't care if I voted or not, because there wouldn't be much for me to vote on.
Well, that's
okay,
right. That's right.
You know, if they can't tell you what to do with your property, whom to hire and fire, how to run your business, what kind of guns you can own, what kind of medicine you can take or don't take, okay, I really couldn't care less.
Right.
Okay, I would assume that the people who, I mean, whether I would meet the criteria for voting or not, I don't know. If you're a tax-paying citizen and you have a stake in the economy, then yeah, and you can pass a civics test. You ought not, that's like saying, well, we're going to allow people to practice medicine, but they don't have to have any kind of qualifications.
Right. No
okay.
medical exams, no board certifications, no nothing.
Right. Now, I mean, of course, there's some of us who believe that really the market can determine that as well. You don't really need all those things. But if you're going to participate in a voting process, all right, you ought to know the basic rules, and you ought to know the basic facts about the government that you're involved in casting votes on. And if you can't do that, and you aren't able to do that, your vote is probably can be counterproductive.
Right.
Okay. This is definitely a situation where quantity does not equal quality.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more on that. Quantity does not make a quality vote.
That's right. That's right.
And we see the border wide open, and people are flooding in. We got another 60,000 headed this way. There's another 10,000 flooding in right now. It's not because they think America is the best. It's because they know that once they get here, they'll be given money, support, housing.
And no impetus to ever leave.
No impetus to ever leave. So who are they going to vote for once they become citizens?
That's
because
right.
ultimately that's the goal to
right. They're
amnesty.
Right. They're re-engineering the demographics of this country. And why? Because they haven't been able to get their agenda with the existing population. Try as they might. They've done a lot of damage. And they've managed to get, pretty far, but they just haven't been able to, because when people really see what it is they want to do, and talk about lying, I mean, they're never honest about their agendas. They always couch it in these innocuous sounding things, but what it boils down to is authoritarian Marxist redistributionist policies, all aimed at lowering the standard of living in America, of Americans, and controlling the economy. But they can't tell you that.
No,
So,
they can't tell you that. People wouldn't want to vote for them.
That's right. But they can bring in wave after wave after wave after third worlders who aren't even literate in their own language and promise that if they're citizens, they'll get benefits and health care and education ad nauseum, indefinitely. Well, who do you think they're going to vote for?
Exactly.
That's exactly right.
Exactly. And, right now, speaking of being lied to, the Biden administration is saying, well, the economy's on track. The economy's looking good. Well, Have you been to the grocery store lately? I don't know about you, but I was looking through my Food Line receipts the other day because you use your debit card. Well, you can track this kind of thing. You can look at it. And average weekly spend at the grocery store was around $100. I'd load the cart and it'd be like, well, yeah, this is probably going to be $100 because I bought this little extra thing.
Yeah, you get a feel for your basket of goods that a person buys on a regular basis, what that's going to cost.
You buy very similar goods every week. Well, that went to $165. So to me, that's $65 a week more at the grocery store.
By my simple math, that's a 65% increase.
There you go, 65% increase. And they're telling us, oh, don't worry about it. This inflation is transitory, and it's only about 3 or 4%, maybe 5 at the worst. Well, 65% is pretty substantial on just groceries to me.
Well, and of course, groceries, food is one area where there has been a lot of obvious inflation.
Absolutely. Look at the price of meats.
Yeah.
It's absolutely shocking when you go in there.
And whether it's true inflation from manipulation of the currency, which I think is most of it, or it's actually just shortages, either way, it's all being engineered.
All being orchestrated.
All being orchestrated, that's right.
The shortages in the workforce right now, all engineered. How can someone stand before the American people and say, well, the fact that we're paying these people additional unemployment and they're actually making more than they were while they were working, that's not a deterrent to going back to work.
Right. That in no way impacts a person's desire to...
Yeah.
Well, again, it's a combination of people who live in a cartoon world and a fantasy world on the low end of the IQ spectrum, and those who know exactly what they're doing and are doing the stuff on purpose and know they can get away with statements like that because there are enough of the former category I just described running, in the media and in other organs perpetuating the nonsense.
Yeah, and we know the media runs cover for them.
Absolutely.
The media does not press Jen Psaki on any of these. The only one asking really tough questions or
nominally tough questions.
Thank you. Nominally tough questions is Peter Doocy.
Yeah.
That's the only one.
Right.
The rest of them.
It's a
softball question. Well, is Joe going out for ice cream tomorrow?
Right.
And what's with Biden in this fake set of the White House?
Yeah, you were commenting on that earlier.
I looked at the video the other day, and I watched the video, and there were flags in the background of when they cut away to a reporter or whoever it was and on the other side of the room. There were flags in the background. Now, evidently, there is no wind in D.C.
Right. Well, and we know that's not true. There's a lot of hot air
anyway. That's right. But evidently there's no wind because none of those flags ever fluttered. They were just fixed. And every time they came back, they were fixed in the same position.
It's like when they landed on the moon, that was fake too.
Yeah. And then I looked at the flowers in the rose garden or in the garden behind Joe Biden.
Yeah.
No breeze there either. It must be very still around that big building. Typically around these big buildings, you get some air currents.
Absolutely.
And, stuff moves around.
Sure.
But
plus, it's the fall here in October. I would expect to see some little, lots of atmospheric activity.
Absolutely. Now, why are they doing this? And of course, the right says, well, so you can use the teleprompter. Which I know that's true.
Yeah.
He used a teleprompter. They can't set a teleprompter up in the Oval Office?
I'm not sure what the fundamental impediments are there, but I think he's held together with chicken wire and duct tape.
I have to agree.
The medical equivalent of that.
Yeah. And of course, we've kind of gotten off on the topic we were going to discuss, but there's some developments in the COVID cult.
Oh, okay.
And I call it a COVID cult because it actually is. It's become a religion.
It certainly
just
is.
Like climate.
It has all the attributes of a religion. That's right.
It does. The mask mandates, the demands to vaccinate, all of these things that really are not backed up by good science.
Not by good science or common sense.
Nash County, in fact, decided to keep the mask mandate for school children for another month. They have to vote on it every month, the school board.
Right.
Well, they decided in a split decision now, so apparently some of them are waking up, but they decided to keep it for another month. Now, the thing of it is, in the 19 months of COVID, in the ages 0 to 17, and I want to restate this, in the ages of 0 to 17, as of August, which is just a couple of months ago, 354 children died with COVID.
All right.
Now, we know because that's overstated, because the New York Times has penned a major correction after overstating COVID-19 hospitalizations for children.
Right.
It went from 600,000 down to 63,000. Now, children are hospitalized all the time with respiratory viruses, with respiratory ailments. But to go from 900,000, almost a million, down to 63,000.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think you're giving them a break because I thought it was 900,000 was what
Yeah,
I
that's
read.
what they claim.
Yeah.
They said 900,000, and they have revised that down to 63,000 children in the hospital with COVID.
So that's not a factor of 2, that's greater than a factor of 10.
Exactly.
An order of magnitude in scientific terms.
Exactly.
Right.
And of course, nothing is said about that on the major networks. CNN won't even address that.
Well, one of the strategies that the print media and TV, broadcast media use, they'll just assert these outrageous things that are just complete lies. They'll let that soak into the public consciousness for a while, and then they'll do a little, 10th page retraction down in the corner, okay? And that's a great mechanism for just making up stuff out of whole cloth. They just lie.
It
Okay,
is.
and
then the Twitter crowd and the Facebook crowd go out and they echo these things.
they echo this, and then reporters use the Twitter source as a basis for a story. I mean, really, journalism, if it ever really was alive in my lifetime, is certainly dead now. I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
It's become such a ridiculous exercise that I don't know. I mean, I put them in the same categories I put public school teachers and some of these politicians and others. I mean, the journalism crowd, they're a bit of a joke.
Oh, they are. They are. Well, even 20 years ago, a survey of journalists across the board, I think 90-some% were considered themselves left.
Right. We're correct, I should
And at this point in time, I would say it's probably 99%.
Oh, easily. Yeah.
Communists. Not
Yeah.
just left, but rabid communists.
That's right.
These
That's
people are
right.
rabid communists. Read their writings.
Read
their
the
rants.
things they say. Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing that the Trump presidency did do, is they kind of teased that out of them. They really they had to drop the veil.
They did.
They were so apoplectic with rage over that outcome in the 2016 election. They just dropped all pretense and became pretty clear, to even casual observers who and what they were.
Absolutely did.
Yeah.
And, we can thank Trump for that, among other things.
You're right.
We can definitely thank Trump for that. And the hope is that people continue to realize that and explore more and educate themselves on these things.
Right.
There are news sources out there where you can get the news. There are plenty of phony sites and conspiracy sites and, just fake sites.
Yeah.
But there are places, you just have to dig for them, you have to look for them, but there are news sources. Many of them are overseas, actually, that report accurately on these things.
Actually, the Daily Mail is a great source for a lot of things often. I mean, and I wouldn't necessarily characterize them as conservative, but they report facts, and with copious amounts of photographs and verbiage, and there's a lot of good, Daily Mail US and Daily Mail UK.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Epic Times is another good one.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, the New American Magazine is a good one. What's interesting, I went to a site that rates these sources, news sources, as liberal, left, how accurate they are, these things. An interesting thing about it is they were so generic in their ratings that even the ones like CNN, MSNBC, who rapidly lie,
Right.
were said, well, they misquote facts sometimes, and they get things wrong sometimes, and they pick dubious sources sometimes. But it said that to almost every one of them. And it's like, well, this is totally useless. This is the typical neutralizing.
Right.
You think you're going there to get good information, and what it is simply neutralizing. Because I can tell you right now, MSNBC and CNN, they do lie.
Oh, they lie
quite frequently. They've been caught lying. I mean, they cover for people like Guido Cuomo.
Yeah.
Joey Behar and all these women on the View.
Which somehow I don't understand how she's even a thing. I mean,
well, I don't know. I don't either. And we keep getting off the topic here, but we were.
Well, I think. Well, I will say, maybe people should spend a little time concentrating on the fundamentals. Okay, forget, it's like any other discipline, okay? I still go back and read my fundamental first-year textbooks in engineering and everything because there's a lot there that, just good to review the fundamentals, the basic first principles. So go back and read things like the Constitution. Yeah. Go back and read some of the early writings of the founders. Read some of the writings of John Locke and Adam Smith and some of these people. Yeah, you may not want to do that. It may not be your cup of tea, but try and find some summary articles or just some things that review these basic principles and compare and contrast to some of the other, economic and political philosophers, Karl Marx, Adolf Hitler, and try and see if you can form your own sort of understanding of these things. And once you understand the fundamentals, you really, all of a sudden, it's like, it all opens, and suddenly you just see all these things around you. You start picking up on the messages in the movies and the commercials, and you start seeing how you're being manipulated politically all the time.
That is an excellent suggestion because that is true. Once you learn the pattern to look for,
right.
These things haven't changed.
That's right.
As we talked about earlier, the communists simply repackage themselves, and it's the same old pattern.
Right.
So once you recognize that, and that's an excellent suggestion, go back and read some of these early things. Don't go to Wikipedia and read that.
Yeah, that's
because
not.
Wikipedia typically, some of their information is good if it's strictly technical information, but some of their information on the founding of this nation is a little off. So pick other sources.
Yeah.
And with that, we are out of time, unfortunately. I've enjoyed the show.
As always, likewise.
So we'll be back next week for more America in Danger to offend the easily offended.
Well, that's our objective, isn't it?
I would say that's an affirmative.
Right.
Have a good week. I'm Robert Crescione.
I'm John Gatsis.
Good night.